Dr. Alina Ray sat at the heart of the quantum research facility, staring at the flickering holographic displays in front of her. The experiment was supposed to be a simple one: measure the fluctuations in quantum entanglement across a series of particles. But what had started as routine research quickly turned into something extraordinary. For the last few weeks, Elena had been tracking anomalies, small deviations in the quantum field that couldn't be explained by current theories. At first, she thought it was just a glitch in the system. But the more data she collected, the clearer it became. Something out there was pulling at the fabric of reality itself. It was while adjusting the resonance frequencies on her primary experiment that it happened. Something shifted in the air, a crackle of energy that felt almost alive. She gasped, backing away from the console as the energy readings spiked. The lab was bathed in a strange glow, one that seemed to bend the very space around it, as though the room itself were warping. Before Elena could react, a shimmer appeared in the center of the lab. A window of swirling light and darkness formed, hovering just above the ground. It didn't behave like a normal portal. It wasn't a hole in space or a crack in time. It was something different, something that should have been impossible. The particles around her experiment fluctuated wildly, and she instinctively reached for the manual override, but it was too late. A force, one she couldn't explain, pulled her forward. She felt her heart race as the world around her seemed to stretch and twist. She barely had time to think as her feet left the ground and she was drawn into the shimmering vortex. The sensation was unlike anything she had ever experienced. Time seemed to stretch, warp, and twist in on itself as Elena was pulled through the strange gateway. She blinked rapidly, trying to focus on the shifting lights around her. The air felt dense, charged with energy, almost alive. With a sudden jolt, everything snapped into place. Elena staggered, her boots hitting the ground with a thud. She blinked, taking in the alien landscape before her. The air was thick and heavy, carrying an odd scent that she couldn't quite place. Towering structures, made of a strange crystalline material, stretched high into the sky. They shimmered like the very fabric of reality was woven into them. In the distance, she could see flashes of what appeared to be cities, but they were unlike anything she'd seen before, glowing with an eerie, otherworldly light. She had no idea where, or when, she was, but one thing was certain: she was no longer in the lab, and she was no longer on Earth. The portal behind her snapped shut with a resounding crack, and she was left standing alone in a strange, unknown world. Panic began to rise in her chest, but she quickly pushed it down. Her scientific mind kicked into gear. This was a discovery of a lifetime, an entirely new reality. She had to stay calm and document everything. Taking a deep breath, Elena activated her portable recorder. "This is Dr. Alina Ray, reporting from, well, I don't know where yet. It seems I've discovered a gateway to an entirely different world, or perhaps a different dimension. The energy readings are unlike anything I've ever encountered and—" Her voice faltered as she turned toward the distant horizon. In the sky above, something was moving, a vast, dark shape, shifting and pulsing with unnatural energy. A loony presence that felt wrong, out of place. And then she heard it, the low, resonant hum of something, watching her. Before she could react, the ground trembled beneath her feet. Something was coming. The unknown world had just revealed its first secret. This continuation keeps the tension high by introducing a strange new world, the first signs of danger, and Elena's realization that her discovery is much bigger and more dangerous than she initially thought. Elena's pulse quickened as the ground beneath her trembled again, stronger this time. She instinctively reached for the equipment strapped to her waist, double-checking the pulse scanner and signal beacon. There had been no communication with Earth since the portal had closed behind her, and the eerie presence in the sky loomed larger by the second. She had no idea what kind of world she'd stumbled into, but she knew one thing: she couldn't face it alone. Back at the Quantum Research Facility, Elena had quickly reached out to the only people she trusted. Within hours, her team was assembled, ready to step into the unknown. Captain Jackson Hawk, a grizzled war veteran with an impressive track record, was the first to respond. Elena had never been thrilled about bringing him on board. His military background made her uneasy, especially given the potential for conflict between worlds. But when she made the call, he'd accepted without hesitation. The team had grown to include Dr. Nexus, a quantum physicist and Elena's longtime friend, as well as Lieutenant Maria Vargas, a skilled communications officer, and Specialist Oliver Drake, a cybernetic engineer who could fix anything that plugged into the Nexus. Each one brought a unique skill set to the table, and their combined expertise was the only hope of unlocking the full potential of the Nexus and surviving whatever dangers lay on the other side. With a heavy heart, Elena keyed in the activation sequence for the new portal she'd managed to reconstruct from the remnants of her lab's equipment. The shimmer of light appeared again, but this time, it wasn't just a simple tear in space. The Nexus had stabilized, forming a massive archway of golden energy. Through the gateway, Elena could see the alien world's chaotic horizon, the same one she glimpsed when the portal closed behind her. The towering structures, the twisting clouds, and the ominous dark shape in the sky. Her team stood at the ready behind her, each wearing their own gear: combat suits, packs loaded with survival essentials, and the most advanced tech they could carry. As Elena stepped toward the shimmering light, Captain Jackson spoke, his voice firm but edged with skepticism. "You sure about this, Doc?" he asked, adjusting the weight of his weapon on his shoulder. "We don't know what's waiting for us on the other side. This could be a one-way ticket." Elena hesitated. The unknown was a powerful force, and even she wasn't sure what they were walking into. But she knew they had no choice. Earth depended on the knowledge they would gain from the Nexus. It wasn't just an opportunity for exploration. It was a chance to secure humanity's place in a universe that had been far beyond their reach. "We don't have time to waste, Jackson," Elena replied, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her chest. "This isn't just about science anymore. We need to find out who, or what, controls the Nexus, and why it's been hiding in plain sight. Whatever's on the other side could change everything." The rest of the team exchanged nervous glances, but they nodded in agreement. They were a crew of individuals with their own motivations and doubts, but one thing was certain: they would stand together as they ventured into the heart of the Nexus. One by one, they stepped through the gateway. The moment Elena crossed the threshold, the world around her changed entirely. The shimmering light enveloped her, and the sensation of motion was like being inside a tunnel made of pure energy. Her stomach lurched, her senses overwhelmed by the disorienting shift. Then, just as abruptly as it began, the tunnel opened, and they were standing on solid ground again. The team looked around in awe. The alien world before them stretched out endlessly, an untamed, jagged landscape with huge crystalline structures and bizarre flora. It was both beautiful and terrifying, as though the world itself was a living organism, breathing and pulsing with energy. A low, rumbling sound echoed from the distance, followed by the unmistakable thrum of something large approaching. Elena's heart skipped a beat. "We've got company," Maria whispered, scanning the horizon with her handheld device. The sound grew louder, and the dark shape in the sky seemed to grow more distinct, an enormous serpentine creature with metallic scales that reflected the unnatural light of the world. Elena's pulse raced. There was no turning back now. The Nexus had revealed its first danger, and it wasn't going to be kind. "Stay sharp," Jackson growled, his hand tightening around the handle of his rifle. "We're in their world now." The team stood at the edge of the alien landscape, the towering crystalline structures casting strange, shimmering shadows across the barren terrain. The distant rumble of the massive creature drew closer, sending vibrations through the ground beneath their boots. Elena's pulse raced as she scanned the surroundings, her mind working overtime to assess their situation. Whatever it was, they couldn't afford to be caught off guard. "Everyone, stay close," Elena said, her voice tight with tension. "We don't know what kind of threats this world has, and we need to stay mobile." Captain Jackson, ever the pragmatist, glanced at her, his sharp eyes studying the horizon. "We need to move, Doc. That thing in the sky's coming down fast. We don't want to find out what it's capable of." Elena nodded, quickly recalibrating the portable scanner in her hand. The readings were unlike anything she'd encountered. The electromagnetic fields in this world were far more intense than anything Earth-based technology could handle. She had a feeling that even their most advanced equipment might not function for long if the environment grew more hostile. Still, there was no turning back now. This was the reason they were here: to explore, to understand, and, above all, to survive. "Let's head toward the structures," Elena ordered. "If we can find shelter, maybe we can get a better sense of where we are and what we're up against." With Jackson leading the way, the team moved quickly toward the closest crystalline tower. As they approached, Elena's scanner pinged with new data. There was something unusual about the crystalline formations. They weren't natural. The geometry was too perfect, too symmetrical. "These aren't just formations," Lionitsu murmured, her voice full of awe. "This looks like technology, perhaps some sort of energy conduit." Elena frowned. If the towers were indeed some kind of tech, it raised the stakes. They were no longer just explorers. They could be walking into the heart of an advanced alien civilization. But the feeling of being watched, the oppressive weight of the air, told her that they weren't alone. As they reached the base of the largest tower, a sudden sharp noise rang through the air, like metal scraping against stone. The creature in the sky was closer now, and from the sound of it, it had landed. Elena's skin prickled with the sensation of being hunted. Suddenly, the ground shook with the weight of something massive moving beneath them. Before anyone could react, the ground split open with a violent crack, and from the rift emerged a squad of armored figures. They were tall, humanoid but clearly not human, skin that shimmered like polished obsidian, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. The leader stepped forward, his presence imposing, his voice a deep rumble that vibrated through the air. "Intruders," he intoned. "You trespass on the domain of the Zorvans." Elena froze, her mind racing. The Zorvans. The name sent a chill through her veins, a whisper she'd heard during her preliminary research on the Nexus, an aggressive, war-driven race that had conquered countless worlds. If these were indeed Zorvans, then their arrival on this world was no coincidence. They were here for something. "We're not here to fight," Elena said, trying to keep her voice calm. "We came to explore, to understand the Nexus. We mean no harm." The Zorvan leader tilted his head, his glowing eyes narrowing as he assessed her. "You are not the first to claim peace. Yet peace eludes this place. Only war remains. You have entered the war zone of the Nexus, and you will follow its rules or face annihilation." The words hit Elena like a physical blow. The Nexus wasn't just a gateway, it was a battleground, a place where civilizations clashed for power, control, and survival. The Zorvans, with their towering presence and advanced weaponry, were a force to be reckoned with. "We don't want to get involved in your wars," Jackson interjected, his voice edged with caution. "But we can't leave without answers. You'll have to let us pass." The Zorvan leader studied them for a long, tense moment before speaking again. "The Nexus does not allow the unworthy to pass. You will be tested." Before anyone could react, the ground beneath them shifted again, and a massive wall of energy erupted from the crystalline structures. The air around them crackled with power as a second wave of Zorvan soldiers appeared from the shadows. The team was surrounded. "Defend yourselves," the leader commanded, his voice cold. In an instant, the peaceful exploration they had hoped for shattered. The Nexus had revealed its true face, a place of unrelenting war and peril. Elena felt her heart race. This was no longer about scientific discovery. It was survival, and the Zorvans weren't going to let them leave without a fight. As the Zorvans advanced, the team readied their weapons, preparing for what would likely be their first battle in a world unlike any they had ever known. In this continuation, the stakes are escalated with the appearance of the Zorvans, a highly advanced and aggressive species that controls this war-torn dimension. The introduction of the Zorvans as antagonists raises the tension and sets the stage for the team's fight for survival in a realm of endless conflict. The air crackled with tension as the Zorvans advanced, their heavy boots thudding against the alien soil. Elena's mind raced. This wasn't just a fight for survival. This was a battle that would decide whether they would leave this world with their lives or be trapped here forever. Captain Jackson stepped forward, his weapon raised, but Elena placed a hand on his arm, halting him. "We can't fight them all. We don't know what we're up against," she whispered urgently. The Zorvans were towering, armored figures, far more advanced than any military force on Earth. Their technology hummed with deadly power, and their leader exuded an intimidating presence. Jackson shot her a sharp look, but then nodded reluctantly. He'd fought wars before, but even he knew when discretion was the better part of valor. The Zorvan leader, a hulking figure with black, metallic skin that glinted in the eerie light of the alien sky, raised a hand to signal his soldiers to halt. The Zorvans stood perfectly still, their eyes glowing with cold, calculating intent. "You will come with us," the leader intoned, his voice deep and resonant, echoing through the barren landscape. "You are trespassers, and for trespassing, there are consequences." Elena swallowed hard, but before she could respond, there was a sudden movement from the shadows, a flash of movement so fast it was almost imperceptible. A cloaked figure appeared, emerging from behind one of the crystalline structures. The figure was humanoid, but its movements were graceful and fluid, almost unnatural. The Zorvans immediately tensed, their eyes darting toward the newcomer. Without warning, the cloaked figure lunged at the Zorvan soldiers, its blade flashing in the dim light. A battle erupted in an instant. Elena barely had time to react as the Zorvans swung their weapons in defense. The cloaked figure moved with terrifying speed, cutting down the first few soldiers with precision strikes. Each movement was calculated, deadly. The Zorvans, caught off guard by the sudden assault, faltered for just a moment, but it was enough. "Elena now," Jackson barked, grabbing her arm and pulling her toward the cover of a nearby crystalline pillar. The team wasted no time. Dr. Lion Exu activated a device on her wrist that scrambled the signal of the Zorvans' communications, disrupting their coordination. Specialist Oliver Drake quickly deployed a set of drones that buzzed overhead, creating a distraction and providing aerial surveillance. The team made their way toward the edge of the battlefield, keeping low. Elena's mind raced as she watched the cloaked figure fight with such ferocity. It wasn't just a warrior, it was something else, something deeply connected to this world. The Zorvans were clearly caught off guard by the figure's appearance. This was no random act of rebellion. This individual had a purpose, and it seemed their goals might align with the team's. The cloaked figure cut through another Zorvan soldier, then turned toward Elena and the others, motioning for them to follow. Jackson eyed the figure warily, still gripping his weapon. "You trust this? We don't know who they are." "We don't have a choice," Elena said, her voice urgent. "We need answers, and I have a feeling they have them." The cloaked figure led them through a series of narrow, twisting paths between the crystalline structures. They moved quickly, taking advantage of the chaos they had caused. Elena couldn't help but feel a sense of urgency building. They had to get to the source of the Nexus, find out who or what controlled it before the Zorvans regrouped. Finally, they reached a hidden alcove, sheltered from view by a massive crystal formation. The cloaked figure turned to face them, its hood now pushed back to reveal a face that was as unexpected as it was unsettling. The individual was humanoid, but with features unlike any human. Their skin was a pale, iridescent hue, almost translucent, and their eyes were wide, with elongated pupils that glowed faintly. Their expression was one of calm, but there was an intensity in their gaze that suggested a deep understanding of the Nexus power. "I am Thaler," the figure spoke, their voice smooth, but with an undeniable edge of authority. "I am a Veller, one of the last of my kind. And you, humans, have just walked into a war that will shape the fate of countless worlds." Alina's heart pounded in her chest. This was the break they needed, an ally who seemed to know the truth of the Nexus and its role in this endless war. But there was one question that hung in the air unanswered. "Why help us?" Alina asked, her voice steady but laced with suspicion. "The Zorvans, why do they want to destroy us?" Thaler's eyes flickered with something akin to sadness. "The Zorvans are not just conquerors. They seek to control the Nexus for their own twisted purposes. If they succeed, every reality, yours, mine, all of them, will be enslaved." Alina exchanged a look with Jackson, her heart sinking. They had no idea what they had stumbled into, but Thaler's words confirmed their worst fears. The Zorvans weren't just fighting for power in their own universe. They were fighting for the power to control all of existence. "We need to stop them," Alina said, her voice resolute. "We need to end this war before it consumes everything." Thaler nodded. "Then you are already too late," they said quietly. "The Zorvans are already gathering their forces to strike at the heart of the Nexus, and the key to stopping them lies with you." The weight of those words hit Alina like a wave. They were no longer just visitors to an alien world. They were now part of something far larger, a battle for the future of all realities, and it was up to them to stop it. In this continuation, the team's unexpected alliance with Thaler, a member of the Veller, introduces an important new player in the struggle against the Zorvans. The stakes are raised as the Veller reveal the true scale of the conflict, one that spans across dimensions. Alina and her team are now not just fighting for survival, but for the fate of multiple realities. The tension in the alcove was palpable. The team huddled around Thaler, absorbing the gravity of the situation. Alina's mind raced with the implications of what the Veller had revealed. The Zorvans weren't just a threat to this world, they were a threat to every world, every reality. If they controlled the Nexus, the fabric of existence itself could unravel, turning countless civilizations into pawns in a war they didn't even know they were part of. Alina took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. "What exactly do we need to do to stop them?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Thaler's glowing eyes flickered with a somber intensity. "The heart of the Nexus is located in the Nexus Citadel," they said. "It is the source of its power, the place where all paths converge. If the Zorvans reach the Citadel and access its core, they will be able to rewrite reality itself. The balance will be lost. The Citadel must be protected at all costs." Jackson stepped forward, his arms crossed. "How do we get to this Citadel? And what's stopping the Zorvans from getting there first?" Thaler's lips twitched, a faint shadow of a smile appearing, though it quickly faded. "The Citadel is not easily reached. It is hidden within the very fabric of the Nexus, a shifting and labyrinthine place. The Zorgans have already gathered a small army, but they are not the only ones vying for control of the Citadel. There are others, forces who seek the power of the Nexus, whether for good or ill." Alina's mind was spinning. If there were other factions involved, the situation was even more dangerous than she'd anticipated. This wasn't just a war between two species. This was a battle for the future of all realities, with countless players now at the table. "Other factions?" Alina asked, her voice tight. "Who else is involved in this?" Thaler paused, considering the question before answering. "I cannot say for certain. The Nexus is a place of great mystery. Many races seek its power. Some wish to preserve it, others wish to exploit it. The key to understanding the Nexus lies in its very nature. It exists not only as a physical space, but also as a conduit between dimensions." Its purpose is to connect, to bridge the gaps between realities. To use it for war is to risk the destruction of all worlds. Alina exchanged a glance with Jackson. Then we have to reach the Citadel before the Zorvans or anyone else does. But how do we even begin to find it? Thaler's gaze shifted toward the towering crystalline structures around them, then back to the team. The path to the Citadel is hidden within the Nexus itself. It is not something that can be found with technology or brute force. The Nexus must be understood, felt, its currents, its energy. Only then can you begin to seek a way forward. Dr. Lianxu stepped forward, a glint of excitement in her eyes. So, you're saying the Nexus is alive? It's not just a network of pathways, it's something more. Thaler nodded, their expression growing more serious. Yes, the Nexus is alive, and it is more than just a structure of space and time. It is a consciousness, a force that reacts to those who enter it. To walk its pathways is to connect with it, to understand its will. That is the only way to find the Citadel. Jackson's face tightened. You mean we have to communicate with it? How do we do that? Thaler paused before answering. You must open your mind, your senses. The Nexus will guide you, if you are worthy. If it deems you worthy, it will show you the path. Alina felt a chill run through her. The Nexus was more than just a gateway to other worlds. It was an intelligent entity, one that could choose who was allowed to pass through its borders. And now, they were about to enter its heart, a place where power beyond comprehension was waiting to be claimed. We need to prepare, Alina said, her voice steady despite the uncertainty that gnawed at her. We'll need to be ready for anything. If the Nexus is alive, if it can choose who it lets in, then we'll need to prove we can handle whatever comes next. Thaler nodded, their eyes narrowing slightly. The Zorvans may be powerful, but they are not the only threat you will face. There are others who will challenge you, force you to confront your deepest fears, your greatest weaknesses. But if you are strong enough, you will find the Citadel, and you will stop the Zorvans. As the team readied themselves for the journey ahead, Alina couldn't shake the feeling that the hardest part was yet to come. The Nexus had already shown them its power, and now it was calling them deeper, into its heart, into the very core of the multiverse. The path was unclear and the dangers were unimaginable, but one thing was certain, they would not stop until they reached the Citadel. For if they failed, the consequences would be far worse than anything they could imagine. And so, they set off, following Thaler into the unknown, the shifting, pulsating energy of the Nexus swirling around them as they ventured toward their destiny. In this continuation, the stakes are raised even further as the team learns the true nature of the Nexus. It is a living, conscious force, one that will test them at every turn. With the Zorvans still lurking and other unknown factions pursuing the power of the Citadel, Alina and her team must navigate both external and internal challenges. The journey ahead will not only test their survival skills, but their very understanding of reality itself. The Nexus, with its alien landscape and fluctuating energy, felt like an entirely different reality from the one Alina and her team had known. Every step they took seemed to alter their perception of space and time. The crystalline structures, which had once seemed static and unmoving, now shimmered and pulsed with a life of their own. The air was thick with energy, and the ground beneath their feet trembled ever so slightly, as though the very planet was aware of their presence. Thaler led them deeper into the labyrinthine corridors formed by the towering structures. The shadows seemed to lengthen and shift as they walked, casting fleeting shapes that made Alina's skin prickle with unease. There was something unnerving about the Nexus, its disorienting movements, the sense of being watched by an unseen force. Yet it wasn't just the external surroundings that unsettled her. It was the strange feeling creeping into her mind, a whisper at the edge of her consciousness. "Are we close?" Jackson asked, his voice low as he scanned the eerie surroundings. "We are close," Thaler replied, their tone measured but full of gravitas. "But the Nexus will not allow you to reach the Citadel easily. It will test you. It will show you what lies hidden in your hearts, your fears, and your desires. Only those who pass the trials will be granted access. Elena felt a shiver run down her spine. The idea of being tested, of facing something as intangible as her own psyche, was not a comforting thought. Yet there was no turning back now. The weight of the mission, the survival of countless worlds, pressed heavily on her shoulders. They had come too far. Suddenly, the landscape around them shifted once more. The ground trembled violently, and the air crackled with an almost electrical charge. The crystalline towers groaned and twisted, rearranging themselves as if responding to some unseen force. Elena barely had time to brace herself as the world around them seemed to collapse into a swirling vortex of light and shadow. "Stay together," Jackson shouted over the roar of the shifting environment. He reached out, grabbing Elena's arm and pulling her toward a nearby pillar for shelter. The others followed suit, huddling close as the Nexus seemed to fold in on itself. The very reality they stood on felt unstable, like the ground beneath them was being swallowed by a vast, unseen chasm. Then, as suddenly as it had started, the chaos ceased. The vortex of light and shadow disappeared, leaving them standing in a different place entirely. Elena blinked, trying to make sense of what had just happened. They were no longer in the twisting corridors of crystalline structures. Instead, they stood in the middle of a vast open space. A golden light filled the sky above, casting a strange glow over the barren landscape. In the distance, a massive, jagged mountain rose from the earth, its peaks crowned with an ethereal mist. The mountain seemed to call to them, a silent beacon in the strange, otherworldly place. "This is it," Thaler said, their voice barely audible over the oppressive silence. "You have passed the first trial of the Nexus, but this is only the beginning. The Citadel lies beyond the mountain. It is where the paths converge. But beware, the trial is not over. The Nexus will show you your deepest fears, your greatest regrets. Only by overcoming them will you be granted access." Elena felt her heart rate quicken. The first trial had been a disorienting test, a shift in reality that had nearly broken their cohesion. But this felt different. There was a heaviness in the air, a tangible weight pressing down on them. The mountain ahead seemed to loom larger, the mist swirling around it as if it were alive, watching them. "Stay focused," Jackson said, his voice steady despite the uncertainty in his eyes. "Whatever this trial is, we'll face it together." Elena nodded, though a nagging doubt lingered in the back of her mind. The Nexus was more than a place. It was a living entity, capable of bending time, space, and reality. What they would face on the other side of that mountain would be something far more personal, something that no amount of weapons or technology could overcome. The path ahead was unclear, and the mountain towered over them, a constant reminder of the challenges they would soon face. As they moved forward, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that the Nexus wasn't just a place of power. It was a mirror, reflecting not only the universe's potential for destruction, but also their own potential for salvation or failure. The closer they got to the mountain, the more Elena felt the pull of the Nexus, a sense of inevitability that they couldn't escape. She could feel it inside her, a quiet whisper that seemed to echo in the depths of her mind. This was the moment of reckoning. In this continuation, the team is thrust into the heart of the Nexus, where the environment itself shifts and tests them. The first trial has already begun, and the unsettling feeling of being tested grows stronger. The team must now face their own fears and insecurities if they are to continue their journey toward the Citadel. The tension escalates as they prepare to scale the mountain that leads to the next trial, knowing that what lies ahead will test not just their physical endurance but their very souls. The journey toward the mountain was unnervingly quiet. The ground beneath their feet, though solid, seemed to hum with an energy that was both alien and ancient. The mist around the mountain thickened, swirling like a sentient being, wrapping itself around the team as they trudged forward. The air grew heavier with each step, pressing down on them like 1,000 unspoken thoughts. It was as if the Nexus itself was watching, waiting for them to falter. Alina walked in front, her senses heightened, every nerve alert to the unseen dangers ahead. She could feel it, the weight of the trial, the knowledge that something awaited them on the other side of this mountain, something that would force them to confront the very core of who they were. Jackson walked beside her, his jaw set, his eyes scanning their surroundings. Despite his tough exterior, Alina could tell he was uneasy. The Nexus wasn't something that could be fought with weapons or strategy. It was something far more insidious. "Do you feel it?" Jackson muttered, his voice barely audible over the eerie silence. "Like we're being pulled towards something. Not just physically, but something deeper." Alina nodded. "I do. It's like the Nexus is trying to reach inside us, see what we're made of. It's not just about getting to the Citadel. It's about proving we're worthy of it." As they neared the foot of the mountain, the air seemed to vibrate with an energy that made Alina's skin tingle. The mist thickened, swirling around them in an almost hypnotic pattern. The peak of the mountain, which had once appeared distant and unreachable, now loomed directly above them, as if the distance between them had been erased. Without warning, the mist parted, revealing a massive stone archway carved into the side of the mountain. It was ancient, its edges worn by time, yet it pulsed with an otherworldly energy, as though the very rock was alive. The archway beckoned them forward, a silent invitation to step into the trial. "Is this it?" Lion Exu asked, her voice filled with awe. "Is this the way in?" Feller nodded grimly. "The path inside the mountain will lead you to the heart of the Nexus. But be warned, the trial is not one of strength or skill. It is one of the mind, the spirit, and the soul. What you face within will be your greatest fears. You will have to confront your own weaknesses, your own darkest thoughts. Only those who overcome these trials will be allowed to enter the Citadel." The words hung in the air like a weight, heavy and oppressive. Alina felt a knot form in her stomach. She had heard of trials before, tests of physical strength, of strategy, but nothing like this. This was different. The Nexus didn't want to see their combat prowess, it wanted to see their essence. Jackson stepped forward first, his face set in determination. "We don't have time to waste. We go in together. No one falls behind." Alina gave him a tight nod, and with that, the team passed through the archway. The world shifted instantly. The air was no longer dense with energy, and the mist faded into a pure, blinding white. The team found themselves standing in a place that felt both familiar and alien, an endless expanse of soft, white sand stretching as far as the eye could see. In the distance, a dark figure appeared, its features indistinct but unmistakable. It was them, each of them. Alina froze as she looked at the figure before her. It was her, but not. A twisted, distorted version of herself, dressed in tattered clothing, her face contorted in a grimace of pain. The figure stood motionless, yet it emanated an overwhelming sense of loss, regret, and guilt. Her heart clenched. "You'll have to face your regrets, Alina," a voice, her voice, whispered from all directions. "Everything you've run from, everything you've hidden, it will come for you now." The words felt like a physical blow. Alina's mind spun. Her past had always been something she could bury, hidden under layers of duty, responsibility, and focus. But now it was here, raw and exposed. Her failures, the moments she had tried to forget, the people she had lost. It all rushed back in an instant, and she felt herself being swallowed by it. "Focus, Alina." Jackson's voice cut through the fog of her mind, a lifeline in the darkness. "You're stronger than this. We're all stronger than this." Alina forced herself to take a deep breath, shaking off the overwhelming wave of guilt. She couldn't let it consume her. Not now. As the vision of her distorted self flickered, she realized something. This was the Nexus testing her. It wasn't her past that was the real trial. It was her ability to overcome it. To face her fears without letting them dictate her actions. The air shifted again, and the sand beneath her feet rippled, turning into jagged, dark rocks. The scene shifted once more, and now she found herself standing at the edge of a crumbling cliff, staring out into a bottomless abyss. The wind howled around her, but the figure of herself remained, standing motionless, waiting. It was time to face the truth. Alina had to overcome the fear, the regret, the feeling that she wasn't enough. She couldn't let the Nexus win. She wouldn't let it swallow her. Her mind cleared, and she stepped forward, leaving the vision of her past behind. One step, then another, and with each step, the image of the dark figure faded, replaced by the certainty of her purpose. She wasn't running anymore. In this part, the team enters the first of the Nexus trials, a mental and emotional test that forces each member to confront their greatest fears and regrets. Alina faces a distorted vision of herself, weighed down by past failures and guilt. As the team pushes forward, the true nature of the trial becomes clear. It's not the past that must be overcome, but the ability to face it without letting it define them. The path to the Citadel lies in their ability to confront their inner darkness and emerge stronger. The trial within the mountain had tested each of them, pushing their minds and spirits to the brink. But now, Alina stood on the threshold of the Citadel. The trials had been different for each member of the team. Jackson had faced a twisted version of his own guilt over lost comrades. Lion had been forced to relive the deaths of her family, while Fowler's trial had been an ancient memory of their people's downfall. Each trial had shaken them, but none had broken them. They had all emerged stronger, more united in their purpose than ever before. They had faced their darkest selves, overcome their inner demons, and now they were ready to confront the true enemy, the Zorvans, and the unstable force that was the Nexus itself. The massive gates of the Citadel loomed before them, their surfaces etched with intricate symbols that seemed to glow with an inner light. The gates were both magnificent and foreboding, their grandeur matched only by the ancient power they held. There was no doubt that this place was the heart of the Nexus, a nexus of all realities. "Is this it?" Jackson asked, his voice reverberating in the silence. "The Citadel?" Alina nodded. "This is where everything changes." Thaler stepped forward, their gaze fixated on the gates. The Citadel is a place of paradox. It exists across dimensions, but it is also anchored to this reality. To enter, one must offer something in return. The Nexus will not allow anyone to simply walk in. "Offer what?" Lion asked, a note of skepticism in her voice. "We've already proven ourselves. We've passed its trials." Thaler looked at each of them, their expression inscrutable. The trials were but a prelude. The true test comes now. The Nexus will ask you to sacrifice something in exchange for the power you seek, and it will not be something trivial. Alina's heart skipped a beat. She had expected challenges, but sacrifice? It was a word that carried weight, a burden that no one could truly understand until it was placed before them. "What do you mean by sacrifice?" Alina asked, her voice steady despite the rising tension in her chest. "The Nexus will ask for what you hold most dear," Thaler replied softly, "and only by surrendering it will you gain what you need to stop the Zorvans." Jackson clenched his fists. "We don't have time for this. We need to move now." But Thaler's expression remained calm, almost sad. "I understand your impatience, but be warned. A sacrifice is not something to be taken lightly. The Nexus is not a place of bargains. If you cannot part with what it asks, then you will not pass." Alina's thoughts raced. What could the Nexus want from them? Their memories? Their desires? There were so many things they could lose, things they had fought so hard to protect. Could they bear to let go of them? Could she? Without another word, Thaler placed a hand on the Citadel's massive door. The gates creaked open slowly, revealing the inner sanctum. The light inside was soft, yet it seemed to vibrate with the same power they had felt throughout the Nexus, a pulse that resonated deep within their bones. Alina took a deep breath and stepped forward, her heart heavy with the uncertainty of what was to come. The others followed, but no one spoke. The weight of the choice they faced pressed down on them all, heavier with each step. Inside the citadel, the world shifted once again. The space was not as it seemed. Walls and floors morphed, shifting between dimensions, like the very fabric of reality was bending. Before them stood a singular pedestal, atop which hovered a glowing orb. It pulsed with an energy that was both calming and unnerving at once. The center of the Nexus, the heart of the citadel. But then, as they neared, the voice of the Nexus echoed through the chamber, low and omnipotent. To stop the Zorvans, you must give up what you love most. Your greatest desire must be surrendered. The words reverberated in the air, filling the room. Alina felt the floor beneath her feet tremble as the realization struck her. The Nexus was offering them ultimate power, the power to rewrite the multiverse itself. But it was clear, to wield this power, they had to relinquish something that they could never get back. Alina's gaze turned to her team, each of them standing in stunned silence, their faces pale, their eyes wide with the weight of the decision ahead. She could see the turmoil on their faces, the conflict of duty versus the cost of personal sacrifice. But Alina knew, she could feel it in her bones. This was not just a test of strength or courage. This was a test of selflessness, of what they valued most. They had all given so much already, and now the Nexus was asking for the one thing they couldn't bear to lose. Alina stepped forward, her mind made up. She knew the answer, and so did her team. They had already chosen their path. The Zorvans would fall, the multiverse would be saved, but at what cost? In this final part, the team faces the ultimate test, a choice that will demand personal sacrifice to achieve their goal. The Citadel, as the heart of the Nexus, offers them immense power, but only if they give up something precious to them. The final decision looms over them, as they prepare to confront the Zorvans and save all of existence, knowing that victory may come at a price too great to bear. The stage is set for the final confrontation, where the true nature of sacrifice will be revealed.